This is the Chris Love Show, and I am Chris Love. In 2023, the federal courts decided that since Alabama residents or Alabama black residents make up roughly 27% of the population, and since there was only one congressional district that favored blacks have their own representation, they decided that since Alabama is roughly 27% of the population, as far as black residents, that there should be two districts that favors a Democrat of black residents representation. So a second district was formed, which was District 2, and there were several people that ran for that seat, and ultimately an attorney named Shamari Figures won that election. So fast forward roughly April 29th, 2026, the Supreme Court came down with the Calais decision. The Calais decision pretty much stated that states had to show that there is some type of racial issue or racial problem that would require them to have districts. So what the Supreme Court says that you can no longer use race to draw congressional seats, mainly because using race in Alabama and other southern states like Georgia, Texas, Tennessee, pretty much the states that succeeded from the Union resulting in a civil war, you can no longer use race to form congressional districts because that was reverse discrimination against non-black residents, meaning white residents and other residents as well. So with that being said, Alabama Governor Kay Ivey held a special election to redraw the maps. And there was a lot of Republicans in the Alabama legislature that wanted to go 7-0. They knew that they could not get 7-0 map to pass, so they stuck with the 6-1 map, meaning that it, other than some few distinct changes, it was the congressional seats that was present before 2023. So now Alabama has still has 7 congressional seats, but instead of 2 favoring black residents to choose their candidate of choice, they only have 1 resident, 1 district. And right now, that person is Terry Sewell. So the question is, should people have the representative of their choice? And of course, I live in Alabama, and a lot of people I talk to on both sides say, well, shouldn't we be to the point where race should not be defined in anything, whether it's getting a home, applying for a job, anything? Are we to the point now where people no longer look at race? And that's a tough question to ask. That's a very tough question to ask. But the Supreme Court said, well, in the Trump administration, they've been slowly building up to this, saying that race can no longer be applied. But the problem is in the South, since the founding of America, really since black people have landed on the shores of America since 1619, race has played a part in society. And we're going to look at history to show us how representation really matters. Now, due to the Calais decision, the NAACP came out with the Out of Bound campaign, pretty much stating that they would like black residents to no longer support college sports like football and basketball in those states that have gone back to redraw their maps. In essence, reduce the number of Black Americans that are able to be in Congress. Because once again, the reason why we have those districts that favor Black candidates because of the discrimination of Black Americans not able to fulfill the American dream, which is stated in the Declaration of Independence. Now, so we're going to look at history. And the one thing we're going to see is that America was founded with the promise of representation. And we're going to look at two figures. We're going to look at somebody you know very well and somebody you probably never heard of, but you will know about him today. So the first person we're going to start with is somebody you know. His name is George Washington. He's not the president at this time. He's a young George Washington who's trying to make his way in life. He comes from a tobacco growing family. His father passed away when he was very young, and at an early age, he had to take over the family business growing tobacco. Move forward in time, he's now a young man. He's 22 years old, and he is now a lieutenant colonel in the provincial armed forces for the British Empire. Now understand, at this point, we have the colonies in the United States, 13 colonies. And everybody who's in the colonies in America are still technically British subjects, which is the subjects of King George. These are colonies of Great Britain. Now, for some crazy reason, Great Britain did not allow American citizens to be actual British officers. It was like they could only be in the militia or the National Guard or the Reserve, but they couldn't be actual British officers. George Washington wanted to rise himself up into society by becoming a British officer. So at 22, he received his first command, and due to that, that's how the French and Indian War started, due to a mix-up of him attacking a small French squad. Now, after the French and Indian War, George Washington went back home and to go back to the tobacco farming business. After a time, the British Empire had to pay for the debt of fighting in the French and Indian War. And that's where the British Empire, headed by King George, decided to say, okay, well, we're going to tax the American colonies. We're going to tax the American colonies on paper, anything that we could tax, we're going to tax. And of course, the most famous thing that they taxed was, of course, tea, which started the Boston Tea Riot. Now, the American colonies did not like this. One, they were already being treated as second-class citizens, and they were being treated as second-class citizens. They didn't have the full rights of British citizens. And really, the final rub was that George Washington could not receive in a commission to be a British officer. In hindsight, had the British allowed George Washington to be an officer, the United States probably would have been formed. But they did not allow him to be a British officer, and he felt like being treated as a second-class citizen was wrong. If they were going to be taxed, then they should receive representation for being taxed. Now, some of y'all probably already know where I'm about to take this. So, the American Revolution was started to declare their independence from the British Empire. Now we're about to go to the second person of our story. His name is William Lee. He was George Washington's manservant, or for a more accurate description, he was George Washington's personal slave. George Washington called him Billy. So we're going to call him Billy. So Billy was with George Washington for the entire 8 years of the Revolutionary War. He was by George Washington's side through the good times and the bad times, through the highs and the lows, through the victories and defeats. He was a loyal servant to George Washington. I have to imagine while the American colonists was fighting for their independence, they in turn were treating black residents in America at that time as second class citizens also, because they were black, obviously, and of course they came from Africa and they were transplanted to the American shores beginning in 1619. And this is the hypocrisy of the United States, a nation that was founded on all men are created equal to pursue life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, while American colonists are fighting and many are dying, many were starving, many were freezing to death to fight for their independence. They, in turn, were keeping black people in the same bondage as the British Empire was keeping them in bondage. So I always wonder if Billy ever went to General Washington and say, hey, I think it's great what you're doing, trying to be independent for the new colonies. That's great. But what about us? What about black Americans? Uh, is your fight? Are we part of that fight? Will we receive the benefits of you all fighting for your independence? Can we not be free also? Master, can I be free too? I believe a lot of black Americans during that time probably thought that, probably spoke about it among themselves, but I really doubt that any one of them ever said anything to their masters because they knew the answer. No. Now, during this time, there were free black people during this time, and they were free by a variety of situations. But for the most part, most black Americans in the colonies during this time were indeed slaves. So, long story short, the American colonies, due to the aid of the French arriving to help them, because America really didn't have a navy. The British Empire had a big navy, and due to the final Hail Mary of the French arriving to aid the American colonies, because the French and the British were enemies as well, the American colonies finally won their independence from the British Empire. And now America was an independent nation. So General George Washington, he resigned as the general of the Continental Army. And then shortly after, he was asked to be the first president of the United States. Now, let me just pause here and just simply say that George Washington is a very important figure in American history. Without George Washington, there would not be in America. And sometimes we have to remember history is not a fairy tale. You have to take history with the bitter and the sweet. Do I consider George Washington a great, important uh, political figure, American figure, founding father? Yes. But also he was a slaveholder. And sometimes we have to look at people, not look at the portrait we are used to seeing George Washington looking out at us, but this was a three-dimensional figure with highs and lows. He owned slaves. A lot of people, the founding fathers, owned slaves. And we have to, that's how you got to look at history. You got to look through history through the lens of truth. I'm not diminishing that George Washington was not an important or uplifting figure. He was. But during this time, owning slaves was a common thing and was very common during that time because to really have wealth, you had to have land. Now, in 2026, we got stocks, you got all this other stuff. But during that time, to be wealthy, you had to have vast amounts of land. And if you have a vast amount of land, you got to have people that's going to till the land, which was Black Americans. And also another way of demonstrating your wealth is the amount of slaves you held, because during that time, slaves were not considered people, they were considered property. And it's well known that in historical books, when you have a family tree in your Bible and you're writing down your ancestry, Black people were placed in the ledger where people kept how many plows they had, or how many this, or how many equipment they had. That's where Black Americans were placed at in the ledger of property. That's history. So George Washington, he was president for 2 terms. They were 2 terms. They were pretty tough because one of the things is, what is a president? What does a president do? How does a president act? The one thing President George Washington, he did not want to be King George. He met with the people. He walked among the people, and he did something that set himself apart for other kings and queens. After 2 terms, he stepped down. He said, "This is enough. I'm stepping down. I'm going back to Mount Vernon to enjoy the rest of my years." And that's why most presidents serve 2 terms. Of course, except for one, but that's a different video. So he went back to Mount Vernon. And during the Revolutionary War, Billy got injured. And so he couldn't really be with George Washington while he was president, but he remained at Mount Vernon. And when George Washington passed away, one of the stipulations of his will was that Billy was to be set free upon his death. And Billy was set free upon his death. Billy was the only slave that was afforded that opportunity. So obviously, George Washington had some affection for Billy. Later on, when his wife Martha Washington passed away, it was stipulated in the will that all of their slaves, which was about 123, would be set free upon his wife Martha's death. And that's what happened. Billy, upon being set free, he decided to stay at Mount Vernon, where he was a shoemaker, and people that fought in the Revolutionary War would stop by Mount Vernon, and then they would talk about the war with Billy, and Billy lived out the rest of his days on Mount Vernon. And think about it. You've been a slave all your life, and to be given your freedom, it would have been very hard to just walk away. But a lot of slaves, whether they escaped or got set free, did walk away from that life and then start lives of their own. But Billy chose to stay at Mount Vernon. It goes to show that representation is important. A young George Washington got angry, one, because he couldn't be a British officer. He had the same respect for the British monarchy like any person in England. But because he was born or he was in the colonies, he couldn't receive the full rights of being a British citizen. Then after that, he was taxed heavily. Everybody in the American colonies were taxed to offset the cost of fighting a war. So again, being treated like second-class citizens in that what they felt, thought, expressed about this debt, nobody cared about what they thought about it. We're going to tax you. You're going to like it. Shut up. So how is it they in turn kept another group of people in the same bondage? Guys, this is not my opinion. This is history. This is history. So I'll wrap up by saying this. In 2026, the Supreme Court, to a 6-3 vote, 6 conservative to 3 liberal judges, stated that you cannot use race to determine congressional districts, that everybody has the same vote. And for Black Americans, we now have to live in a post-Calais world. But we've been asking for this for over 400 years. If the Declaration of Independence applied to everybody, that all men are created equal, we wouldn't be discussing Calais decision now. If after the Civil War, where it was not about states' rights, it was about slavery. It was about states' rights to keep slavery and keep 4 million Black people in bondage. After the Civil War and during Reconstruction, if everybody abided by the Emancipation Proclamation and kept true Reconstruction, and that'll be a separate video. Reconstruction was a time period with President Ulysses S. Grant, and I will do a video on him as well. I got a lot of videos to do. It was an era of Reconstruction. That's where the United States saw Black sheriffs, Black congressmen, Black senators, Black people in political offices, schools being started up to aid Black people in doing for themselves and get them out of the slavery and helping them to lift themselves up by their bootstraps. And that was on for about several years until Jim Crow laws came about, restricting the rights of Black Americans. That's when the KKK was formed, again, attacking Black people and other people that supported equal rights for Black people. Had we got ourselves together in 1877, there will be no need for a Calais decision. So from 1877 to the 1960s, which is about 90 years, we go through segregation, lynchings, Jim Crow, up to the 1960s, to the Voting Rights Act. If America read their own Constitution, read their own Declaration of Independence, we wouldn't be discussing this now. Because, as God is my witness, all men are created equal. All people are created equal. Whether they look like you or not. Whether they think like you or not. These are things that we have to deal with. So for Black Americans, for many Black Americans, the Calais decision appears to be another form of taking our rights away. But let me just finish with this. Don't let nobody take your rights away. Vote. Run for office. Partake in your community. School board meetings, city council meetings, county commission meetings. Because there are people out there that do believe that all men are created equal. Unfortunately, there are those out there that feel that one group of people is better than other groups of people. But there's many people going back from the Revolutionary War to the Civil Rights Movement that fought for me, a Black man living in Alabama, to be able to be on YouTube to make a video about why representation is very important. We are coming on our 250th anniversary of the founding of America. What will the next 250 years be like? Thank you for watching the video. This is my first episode. I'm happy to be here. I'm happy to be here with you. Please let me know what you thought about this video. Am I right? Am I wrong? Hey, tell me. Put your comments in the comments below. Also, please like the video. If you don't like the video, dislike it. This is America. And please subscribe. People have the right to express their views. We're going to disagree. Here, all sides are welcome. I'm a Democrat. I'm a proud Democrat. I'm a proud American, retired Army veteran, father, husband. And I believe I live in the best country on this planet Earth. Do we have some issues? Well, sure we do. Sure we do. Who don't? But let's remember, we have more in common than not in common. If you like what you see here, come back. I'll be back with some more videos. If you like me to discuss something, hey, put it in the comments as well. Let's have a conversation. Let's talk. And debate doesn't mean a fight. A debate means a conversation. Thank you, and I'll see you next time.